quick membership and banking status. So as of today, we have 37 paid members. So whoever hasn't paid, and they're about to get a reminder in the email, and then I'll have another membership drive going out with the 200 people on the email list that I've got already. So we'll try to up the membership. Typically, we get about a third of our new members paying in the last quarter of the year. So we'll try and up that number. We have 18 former members or members who were formerly active that have not paid. A couple of these guys have moved on. Some of them I just don't hear from, so we'll bother them. And then there's 5 missing in action, no response on email, calls, or anything else. So moved out of town and moved on. So we'll try to improve that membership a little bit. It looks like there's going to be a large circulation of emails going out to the multiple groups, to the multiple clubs. So, because I saw that email they wanted from Wes that said,
right,
I want to get the. So if you guys don't have any objections, we're going to circulate that email list to the other 5 or 6 club groups, and so that we have a consolidated database. Maybe we can pick up a few members.
I'll explain that in more detail in a moment.
Okay, yeah, just.
Jeremy, as Vice President, you have anything you want to add?
Field day is coming up.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that in a minute.
Nothing else?
Okay. All right. Mark was referred to a large group. Mr. Harwick and I, Harwick is the president of BVARC. I got in touch with him. We had a conversation about, whatever happened to the idea of getting all the presidents of all the clubs in the Houston area together to share ideas, share some activities, and resources where we can pull off of each other's set of presentations. And so we had our first meeting this last Wednesday. We had 13 different clubs represented from the Houston area. He and Jeff Greer of BVARC sent out a note to every club within 50 miles of Houston. That was 35 clubs. Some sent their regrets because their representative was not available that day. But it's very well received. We had John Stratton, our ARRL district or division lead, and we had a couple of other of the field group representatives there, including the ARRL affiliated club coordinator for South Texas, which is the region we're in. And everybody was very high on the idea. What we're going to do is resurrect the Houston Amateur Radio Club. The charter still exists. It is still shown on the league webpage. We're going to change the name to Houston Area Radio Clubs, plural. And try this to coordinate efforts, make it easier for us all to contact each other. We're going to share member lists with y'all's permission, and share access to our webpage. Say that differently. Tell everybody here's where we have our presentation stored, whether it's on our webpage, for us it's our downloads page. For BVARC, it's on their YouTube page. And one specifically that Mike brought up was they had Bob Heil give a presentation last month at BVARC. They're going to put it on YouTube, and he said, everybody take it. It was a great presentation. So we're going to have access to a lot of excellent presentations. We got a real good relationship started up. Jeff Greer is extremely high on the idea. Mr. Stratton is extremely high, and he said that the league actually has some resources available to help such a joint venture work. They worked with one like that in Dallas area, in Oklahoma City area, and he mentioned another one, I don't remember where it was, it's also in Region 5. And they have a suggested structure for how to set up such a group. And so Mike and I are gonna be working with John Stratton to get a structure for this new group, get it set up. I doubt there will be any dues. If there does wind up being anything, it'll be minimal. Maybe we'll set up a fund to help maintain the reflectors in town, something like that. That's it. So it's a really good start. And Mike says, hey, to start off, there's an open invitation to all the clubs to help them S-150, the Houston Grand Prix, museum ships on the air weekend, open invitation, and especially for the new November Greater Houston area tailgate that BVARC is starting up. It was such a good success in beginning part of May. They're going to make it an annual in November. That's the plan anyway. And then restart the Hamfest in March. Brought up is field day. I sent out a request for assistance, who can bring some tables, who's bringing a radio. I got one response back about a radio. Okay, 2 responses on radios. It's Jeremy and Steve. And I'll bring one.
What are you looking for, Ralph? What radios are you looking for?
Any radio you want to bring and test out in the field is fine.
Okay.
And we have been known to, hey, we've got 3 radios, we'll run with 3 radios, so we have at least 3 bands covered at all times, and we can swap radios out. Because before, I had one brand new, ran with it for a little bit, somebody else had a new one, we swapped it out for mine. Just swap them out, get to know your rig, get help from other people, let newbies test different kinds of rigs. Yes, sir.
You were checking on bandpass filters for that.
I have a 20, a 40, and an 80 meter in my kit.
Cool.
Bandpass filters, what he asked. So I do not have a 10 meter. Eventually I'll have to build one. I'm not going to mess with a 160. But with 20, 40, and 80, those bands are almost perfect harmonics, so there's a lot of bleed over. And when we have used this set before for field day, absolutely 0 bleed over between them with those filters installed. I'll need to find some extra jumpers. So anybody, if you've got short jumpers, 1 to 3 foot, please bring those. I was going to order some, and the price for delivery was almost as much as the cost of the jumpers. So I may order some and make a drive up to ABR and pick them up that way. Yes, sir.
When you say jumpers, you're talking about SO239, PL259 coax cables, right?
Yeah, PL259 on both ends, yeah.
Okay.
So anywhere from 1 to 3 foot long, so we can get between the radios and the filters. But I do need some feedback on how many people, because Jeremy's going to cook dinner for us Saturday night. That is the only food the club is providing Saturday night. Any other munchies, midnight snacks, whatever, going to be up to y'all. We do have the 2 shelters available. 8 people per shelter. Somebody, I've forgotten who it was, has already reserved an RV spot right outside of the circle where all the screen shelters are, so it'll give us 3 areas.
Tom has a question.
Yeah. And there's extra parking very close by at the interpretive center parking area. It is $7 per person to get in. But if we have more than 4 vehicles per space, per shelter, there's a fee for the extra vehicle. So if you park in the parking lot and walk over, which is a short distance, that'll help you out there.
Is the alligator on the menu, or are you on the menu for the alligator?
Yes. For anybody who wants, it's a short distance, very short drive over to the volunteer parking area for the observatory. I can take y'all over there. Even if it's not open, I can show you what it is, describe it to you, just in case anybody's interested. We can go up to the top deck, that's always open. The building underneath for the little museum may not be open, but a couple of the employees of the observatory said they want to come over and join us for field day, at least for part of it.
Dom has his hand up.
Oh, okay, Dom, go ahead.
Try it again, Dom. You're gonna have to relay that.
Rick, so that we can get the techs involved in this. I got 90-watt radio, and I can bring that mask system I had at Stephen F. Austin, and we can advertise 2 meters so that the techs can get involved. And I was suggesting Jeremy that the scouts use FRS radios so they get accustomed to using a handheld.
Okay, just a minute, Dom. He's saying Dom is going to bring his portable 2-meter setup, and he's suggesting that maybe the scouts will want to use FRS radios so they can get used to using handhelds and using correct protocol for conversations and contacts. I think that's excellent, Dom. Thank you. Now, the scouts going to be camping. Do you know, Jeremy?
I don't know. I will.
Still a month out.
Yeah. I know some of the leaders probably won't want to camp because of the weather or the heat, but.
Pobrecito. All right, well, hopefully we'll have some scouts join us at least for the day. If they decide to have a camp out, we can set up a radio over there so they can talk across the park to us on 2 meters. All right.
Field, there's a question on the chat saying when is field day?
June 25, 26 is the last full weekend of June every year. And we're going to have at least one person go out and grab site number 9 Friday evening, so we can start setting up early on Saturday morning. And then we can take possession of site number 7 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday. It'll be that way we have time to get it set up for cooking. And both sites we have to be out of by noon Sunday. Mark, you got something?
Yeah, so just a reminder is that we because of logistics, we're gonna have testing here and a club meeting on that Saturday, on field day Saturday. So, because I already have the spot reserved, and then I have other, I think I have 10 people coming in for tests.
Wonderful.
On Saturday, so anybody that wants to show up here and then go out there after Ralph has already done all the hard work, then that's fine. So that's gonna be my plan.
I have a quick question. So if you're a technician and you just tested and you passed your exam for the first time, so you're brand new into the hobby, you don't even have a call sign just yet. Can you go to the field day site where the rest of us, where the food's gonna be and all, and can he operate, can she operate at that point?
That's right, yeah.
Yes.
Anybody can operate, and even technicians that do have licenses will be able to operate in the extra class portion of the band if that's where we're gonna run.
Just,
So,
they'll
because-
just, if they pass their test earlier that day, they'll just bring their CSCE with them showing proof that they passed the test.
That's right, but anybody
doesn't
can
matter.
operate in the extra class using the club call sign under supervision of one of us that's got that class.
Right, yeah, so it doesn't matter on field day or even, and really at any other time, as long as the control operator has the privilege, anybody, third party can operate under the direction of the control operator. So don't have to worry about a license. Okay, everybody clear?
Yeah, so my son might actually be able to join us. He doesn't have a license.
That's fine.
So he
We'll
can,
have to fix that.
Oh, yeah,
Well-
have them join us, absolutely.
yeah, for sure.
You'll have fun out there.
Yeah, Anthony helped you set up the solar panels last
Yeah.
time.
And I won't talk about the rings.
And let's not talk about the Aggie ring this time.
Yeah,
Put
just,
some horns.
everybody bring bug spray, that's one. Oh, and so I think I sent out a draft notice that had the map and everything, so did I send that?
Yeah.
Barry, did Barry get that?
It's on the web.
He did, he
Okay.
got it up already, yeah.
Okay, so so I'll send out a reminder. you know, just like I regularly before the meeting, and, cause that's a pretty concise map and everything else, but as long as it's on the website, then that's fine.
Dom just commented on our, chat saying Jason at Ham Radio 2.0 is interested in our field day, Parks on the Air.
Oh,
Oh, okay, that'd be good.
wonderful. That is awesome.
Oh, definitely extend an invite to him, any
Yeah.
other YouTubers.
Let's get it over to him.
I think we're gonna need a bit more food for the weekend.
Any vegetarian?
Anything else
options?
on field day before we move on? I've got one more, order of business. Yes, sir.
Yeah, preferred, power or frequency settings for radio.
Power, everybody's limited to 100 watts output. Anything less than that is okay. As far as frequencies, we'll be operating 2 meter simplex for whoever we can hit. And then, 20, 40, 80 meters, depending on time of day and what bands are open. If 80 meters not open, we can have a radio up on 10 and probably not bother us on the other bands. As far as particular frequency, I always do hunt and pounce on field day. That just feels better to me. Other people like to park it, find a clear spot, park it, and keep calling CQ. So whatever you want to do.
So you're gonna need plenty of antennas?
Yes, I will have, I've got a 20 meter vertical. I've got the club has a G5 RV that we should be able to set up, which will be multi-band. I've got 20 and 40 meter and 80 meter wire dipoles that can be strung. They're already pre-cut, packaged in a box.
I'll take my Wolf River coils.
Oh yeah, vertical Wolf River coils, great rig, it really is.
I'll bring my buddy pole.
Buddy poles, okay, we're gonna be good.
So, yeah, just so if you bring your own radio, this is a good time to kind of get everything set up, and I think I have that in the notice, but, you know, if you bring a radio, try to bring everything that you can to get it set up, you know, basically ready to plug in. So if you've got a go box or something like that, you know, make sure you got a little table, everything ready to go, ready to plug in. So if you had extension cords handy, you don't know where we're going here, so, you know, you got a 25-foot or 50-foot extension cord.
There is power at both of the sites, both of the camps.
What are the sites?
It's site number 7 and 9, screen shelters at, Brazzaville State Park.
Maybe you can pull the map up from off of the website.
Here, hang on a second.
Yeah, just see if you can pull that.
Dom says I've told him at Baytown, I can do 6 meters. I will bring my WRC.
All right, great. So Dom is gonna be set up for 6 meters with Wolf River coils.
Ralph, you're gonna do anything with digital modes, FT8 or anything like that?
Yeah, it's operator's choice, whatever you like to do. Steve and I were just talking before the meeting that my digital has died for some reason. I can't seem to find, the settings have quit working. So I'm playing voodoo doctor
I
with
can
it.
bring it on 10 meter ring on a computer, do FT8.
All right.
It's running on Linux, Rob.
It's been fine. The only response I think is appropriate.
The notice that I created for
Ralph.
Ralph's 5 emails, that tell the story about what's going on with field day. So not everybody knows where Brazzaville Park is, but it's 50 miles from Houston, kind of southwest. And I say here, so every screen shelter 7 and 9, you do not need a license to operate. So and a reminder, there's a $7 fee to get in.
Hold on a second, there, we'll posted this, never mind.
Okay, there we go. So,
You wanna share that to the
let me
people
see if there's
online?
something else here. Hang on, just back up. Next. Okay, so we have the links to the location there. And also on the operating, there will be operations, but bring everything that you need to go. You need, and people have got to, I think it wasn't clear, but everybody needs to bring a chair and maybe a small table, something like that. What are you doing here?
I'm sharing the screen here so that the folks on the
Oh,
Zoom
okay.
call can actually see
Okay, there we go.
Brilliant presentation.
Okay, there we go. So that's the sheet, that's the layout. I didn't mention the mosquitoes, but, that's always a potential there and.
No biting people, Ralph.
No.
Don't feed the alligator, I tried to get a radio in his mouth, but it was, I didn't have time. So on the next, scroll there is kind of the layout of where we're talking about here. So obviously here's Houston. There's that from where we are right now. It's 51 miles, the shortest route. And of course, we're at the end of the road.
Yeah.
And you can either come from 59 or you come from 288. It's about the same distance, just with with a few less lights along the way on 288. And trees over here, I think the check-in or whatever, the payment is right there, and we're over at the end of the road. Go to the next one. Okay, so this was the map that Ralph had sent in showing the layout of all the facilities and everything else. And so you just kind of wobble your way through there, and there you go. So that's what's going to go out.
There is RV spaces
There's RV
available,
space,
very close to where we're gonna be.
camping spaces.
If you want to bring your RV, I recommend reserving now because they will fill up quick. If you have an RV, reserve quickly because they will fill up.
So there you go.
So Mark, before we let you go, so this presentation right here has been shared or it's been posted? It's actually, where do you
It's on the
find this at?
website.
It's on the
and I'm gonna
webpage.
Send it out.
Okay, it's under events, right? Is that how we get to it?
Documents. Events.
Events.
Events, okay.
Okay, so it's in the events tab of the OFA.
I just sent it out. Barry said he posted it. I didn't look closely. Usually, probably the first of the month, I'll check all that.
Okay.
Okay, so that should be very clear as to how to get it.
Does
Okay.
this park allow alcohol?
No state parks allow alcohol. About field day, including a checklist, a safety checklist, and some the bonuses that are available. If we happen to get a bonus, okay, fine. I'm not worrying about it. This is a little bit of a trial run for us, doing something so far from town. I don't want to sweat any details. We don't have to at this point. But it's a very nice little article here that's pulled out, and we'll see who we can get. See if we can get the Rangers over to join us for a little bit. Maybe Ham Radio 2.0. We'll see who else we can get. Al?
Are you paper logging the field day?
We will use paper logs and then combine them together. If you happen to have a laptop that you want to do your own log on, then send that over. We'll have to figure out who's going to submit it for us. We can pull all the paper logs and electronic logs together.
Could you post, is it already out on there for what the log looks like, paper log should look like?
That's a good point. I'll put that out.
Yeah, there's a package that has all the paperwork on it.
No, it's something I want to just look at and have questions, they can look at a piece of paper now, just to see.
Yeah,
Because it has, what time does it use?
It uses, everything's UTC. So
I'm just saying, that's another problem, because a lot of people don't know UTC, so.
all the radios, all the.
We'll get something set up, a master clock or something.
Yeah, your phone has UTC on it, so the rule is that whoever's gonna write, make sure it's legible, so, cause the last couple of years that I've been doing it, it's chicken scratch on there. And so what we try to do is provide, that we don't use the ARL log sheets cause they're too small. So we triple size put an Excel sheet together and triple size the lines so that in the speed of writing stuff down, you can, even if it's crappy, you can still sort of read it. Okay, it's much easier than a 3mm line
Yeah.
that's on there.
And where possible, we should use splitters, use headphones and splitters. so that if there's somebody who's new or just doesn't feel like getting on the radio, they can listen and do the logging for you while they learn how the back and forth of a contest goes.
And show people how to park and sleep too.
Yeah, if we're
Yeah.
separated enough, it doesn't, you know, inside, when you work inside, it's noisy, but outside, if we're separated enough, you know, you kind of don't need the headphones. But
Unless the
it's
raccoons decide to have a party behind you.
Yeah, it's.
Had that happen. Okay, moving on, we do have a couple of very nice presentations. Stephen has a nice one that I think will be very helpful for a lot of people. It was an issue that I struggled with for a while, till I figured out how to demonstrate it to myself, and I'll explain that after you. I think I've shown you my demonstration, haven't I? No?
Sure. No.
Well, I'll explain it afterwards. Go ahead. It's on signal polarization.
Okay, so you're gonna have to bear with me on this one. It's gonna be a very brief presentation, as you can tell. Go ahead and do this. Start from. Can I, okay. Polarization of the electric field and radio. So, of course, we know that, you know, what we communicate with are electromagnetic waves. However,
You wanna share that onto the,
oh, good idea.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you,
Pay
Jeremy.
a fee.
That's why they pay me the big bucks
It's true, it's true.
and multiply it by 0.
So let's try that.
I was just gonna print it on big pieces of paper.
Does it have the Monopoly Man on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, can somebody on the online please tell us if you're able to see the presentation?
You can see it.
Okay, good. So, like I said, polarization of the electric field is something of utmost importance to ham operators. Now, why would that be? Well, because if you think about it, our coupling from the radios to the atmosphere is through antennas. And antennas can either be in one direction, think of a vertical antenna, or in other directions, think of a horizontal dipole. So the fact that they're 90 degrees offset, vertical versus horizontal, makes or can make a big difference in how we make a contact or we don't make a contact, right? So why is that? Well, because again, remember, we're going to be transmitting through the electromagnetic field, specifically the electric field. You know, if you remember back to engineering school or to your math, we have it's a vector. The electric field can be defined as a vector. And any vector can be decomposed into a horizontal and a vertical component. Think about, remember your x-axis and your y-axis, same idea. Now, if you want to get fancy, that's the way they write the electric field. That's the equation down there. But the takeaway there is that it's got two components. E equals to something times x hat, a little hat on the x there, something along the x direction, the x-axis, plus something else.
Speak up a little bit, Steve.
Okay.
Speak up a little bit, yeah.
Okay, plus something times the little y and the little hat on it, which means, again, the y component, right? Bottom line, we have part of the energy, if you think about it, of our electric field going along the x direction, and part of the energy going into the y direction. If you're aligned to where the energy is coming from, via your antenna, that couples that electric field into your transceiver, and you've got a contact. If you're offset, you're 90 degrees off, you're not going to make a contact. So it's quite important. Okay, so great. So we understand this, right? We're good to go. We just have to align our antenna. Well, not necessarily. We hear a lot in the ham radio hobby. Again, some waves are going to be polarized vertically, some waves are going to be polarized horizontally. So if we align our antenna in one direction or the other direction, we get the signal and we make the contact. That is true in the VHF, UHF world, where if you think about it, let me go ahead to the next slide, you have line of sight. Now you have to forgive this, the text that's in another presentation that I gave, but the idea is that the terrestrial wave, the ground wave, is actually line of sight. So if you're talking VHF or UHF, think your 2 meter and your 70 centimeter communications, then that is true. For example, Wayne's KA5QDG repeater over there in downtown Houston, or wherever it is, the antenna is vertically polarized. In other words, his transmitting antenna is vertical. If you're over here trying to get that signal and you're 90 degrees off, you're going to get a very attenuated signal, if any signal at all. Your receiving antenna should be vertically aligned to get Wayne's signal from his repeater. So that's what we're talking about polarization. Well, not the whole story though, because as we discussed with Ralph way back when, what happens in the HF bands? Now HF, remember, you're 20 meters, 40 meters, and so on. Well, we all know that our signal reflects off of the ionosphere and comes back down, which enables us to go ahead and propagate our signal through repeated hops all around the world. We can make contacts to South America, to Europe, using this technology. What happens though is that when the signal propagates through the ionosphere, remember that nice alignment that you had, say for example, a vertical transmitter signal? When it goes to the ionosphere, when that wave hits the ionosphere, it's rotated. Because of the composition of the ionosphere, it gets very complicated about how it's rotated, but it is rotated. And it gets bounced back in a funny way. So if you're over here, say over here where your transceiver is, the sketch on the right-hand side has somebody's dipole, horizontal dipole, you're thinking, okay, I'm lined up with the transmitting antenna. Well, not necessarily, because the ionosphere has just changed the polarization. So that's why on the HF bands, you're not going to be able to make a good contact if you line up your antennas. So that's a bummer. So that means you can never make contacts. No, that's not the case, because the ionosphere can work against you, but can also work for you. In this diagram, we have the fellow on the left-hand side transmitting with what looks to be a vertical antenna, and the fellow on the right-hand side is receiving that signal and making that contact with a horizontal antenna. And why? He's counting on the ionosphere changing that orientation of the electric field. Okay. Now, the only caveat about this business of HF is that some of the new receivers, and I did some research on that, so they use something called diversity reception. And I thought that was, the greatest thing since sliced bread. I mean, something new that the flex radios have, and I think your 7610 ICOMs, your higher end radios have, which allow for two inputs in the back of your radio, one for an antenna that ideally would be vertically polarized, and the other input for the antenna that would be ideally horizontally polarized. So therefore you're covering all your bases on those radios. It turns out that this diversity reception, as this technology is called, this feature in some radios, actually dates back to World War II. If you think about it, diversity can mean a lot of things. It can mean diversity in polarization angle, but it can also mean diversity in distance. So in World War II, and there's a lot of documentation on this, that they used to have two receivers spaced separately so that they would get this diversity of reception. As soon as the wave is reflected off the ionosphere, hits the first receiver with a particular polarization and strength, it's the second receiver with a different polarization, different strength. So diversity reception is a way to go around this. But again, the nutshell, in summary, does aligning my antenna work every time? Not necessarily. You'll have very good luck probably with a 2 meter, 70 centimeter VHF, UHF, but on the HF side, the ionosphere is going to make your life more interesting. So it's going to scatter that wave that gets reflected down. So unless you're using something with a higher end radius called diversity reception, you're probably going to have to just try one antenna, manually switch over to another antenna, or do what you need to do to get that scattered wave for that particular thing. So hopefully that adds a little bit of clarity on what this polarization business is about. And
Yeah,
Ralph, we talked about this before.
Yeah, let me explain the demonstration. I hit on this when I was trying to explain radio wave propagation to high schoolers at the Museum of Natural Science. I've got a field strength meter. It's an old Radio Shack field strength meter with a piece of wire about this tall stuck in the top of it as an antenna. And that antenna straight up and down. I take a little, Walmart FRS radio. I have the antenna going up and down. I key it, and that meter goes all the way over. Then I turn that little FRS radio 90 degrees, so it's horizontal, and the field strength goes down to almost zero. That's polarization. When you're using line of sight, polarization is critical. But when your signal is reflected, just like sunlight, when the sunlight bounces off of something, it gets polarized in different manners. And so your sunglasses are polarized, block some portion of it, and that's the glare portion. The scattered light is polarized, and your sunglasses block that. What you want to see, which is not polarized, comes on through. So same thing with radio. And so when your signal is reflected off the ionosphere or buildings or mountains, it partially rotates. And it's going to, if you're sending it out vertical, it's going to partially rotate. So a little more of it is horizontal, some of it's still vertical. So either type of antenna will pick up some signal. That's all we're talking about, same kind of thing.
Bit of trivia for you if you're interested. That what we're talking about actually have an effect on all of us. Because during World War II, in the North African campaign, they were using both vertical and the British Army Corps signals, using vertical and horizontal polarization, and achieved a great deal of success. Partially because North African desert is flat as a pancake, so you've got no trees or anything in the way. Fast forward to 1944 with Operation Market Garden, which was staged over mostly Holland, and they used only vertical polarization. They didn't feel it necessary to do anything else. That, combined with the terrain itself, was one of the main reasons why Operation Market Garden failed, because the communications were just not possible. So, a bit of trivia for you.
Yeah, fascinating.
Old trivia for you.
That's neat, thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Question, how does the inverted V problem solve?
The inverted V, great question. Well, an inverted V, properly done, each leg is 45 degrees, so it's going to pick up either polarization just fine.
So you're better off with an inverted V?
In some situations.
Okay.
A typical ham radio answer.
It's a good engineering answer, depends on the situation.
Well, it's a compromise antenna, right?
Yeah.
So it might be good on both vertical and horizontal, but not optimum for each.
That's right.
Hey, just real quick, got a new technician?
Hey!
You're going to build it, right?
I've just heard about it was.
Did you use the app?
Yeah, I think so. It sounds like.
Now, two things I can tell you about it for sure.
All right.
It's going to be fun, it's going to be hot.
Okay, sounds good.
Sounds good.
Is that hot fun?
Do not bring dogs, because alligators love dogs as a delicacy.
Sounds good.
I have seen it out there before.
Okay.
What would you say, Mike?
Bring a hat.
Yeah, bring a hat, yeah.
Of course, if you got a dog you want to get rid of,
Not going there, I'm not going there.
I heard they preferred African blues.
I do have one of those.
You know, they're very.
Ralph,
Yeah.
you got that one ready for you?
All right, is it ready to share?
Yeah.
All right. Now, I've got one on getting ready for summer storms. June 1st is the official start of hurricane season in the Gulf Coast. Now, as we all know, it can be, first hurricane can be 30 days before that. The last one may be 30 days after the end. This is, the bell curve. So, getting ready for summer storms, go ahead. Now, storm info and planning guide. Number one, stay safe. Have a plan and stay safe. Planning guide and information at this webpage. Now, I'm going to have this put up on our webpage for downloads. There should be an active link. It's supposed to be. You can always just copy it and paste it into your browser. This is a like 30 or 40 page booklet from the National Weather Service. It has checklists, it has warnings, it has definitions of different terms the National Weather Service uses, and that type of thing. It's a very good, handy thing to have around. And it's also good because it does not change from year to year. The information is the same. Monitor hurricane info and location, always. National Hurricane Center, NOAA.gov, Atlantic. It brings up a map of the Western Atlantic and the Caribbean and shows you areas of interest as well as active storms. Make a list for before, during, and after the storm. A lot of these online guides have a list to get you started. Next one, please. Now, this one is from one of our members. What they put together, all the things to do before the storm. It's good to break it down that way so that you can focus on what's important for that time frame. And check windows and doors. Board up windows if you're going to get a direct hit from a heavy windstorm. If it's a rain event like Harvey, well, boarding up the windows may not be what you need to do, but you need to clean out the drains around the house. In my particular instance, I did not realize that my new fence, the contractor had driven all the pickets into the ground. No place for the water to go. And so I had water from the backyard of my house seeping into my den and kitchen. I have since gotten out there with a saw and cut me a nice little slot at the bottom of the fence in critical places. Next one, please. Checklist of items to have. All these things. Don't forget baby supplies, pet supplies, some tools. May not be your whole toolbox, but have some key things. Pliers, wire cutters, strippers, hammer, box of nails.
What kind of strippers?
Yeah, okay. Batteries, all sizes. Know what your devices take. AA, AAA, D, C's, 9 volts, whatever it might be. So next one. If you expect to evacuate, leave early. Remember what happened during, I think it was Ike. Every road out of town was at a standstill and people suffered. Some people died on the road. They had to hire tanker trucks of gasoline to go refuel cars on the highway. So, was it Rita? No. Well, I know during Rita, even though it went east of us, it locked up all the cell phone towers.
I think, yeah, it was Rita, because it was the same year as the New Orleans thing.
Okay. Houston area evacuation zone map. Now it's mainly between Houston proper and the coast, but it's broken down by zip code, and it shows different areas, and they'll call it out by area. So take a look. If you're in that zone, which if you live over in Clear Lake, you might be. If you live in LaPorte, you might be. I live where 59 and the toll road hit on the west side of town, so down around Stafford. My house is an 80 foot above sea level elevation. And my house is on the high point of the street. Now that I fixed my backyard fence, I should not have any trouble with flooding. You shouldn't. Yeah, keyword, should. Shouldn't. Okay, next one. Monitor conditions. That's why it came out strange. These are radio TV stations officially designated for emergency comms in Houston. 740 AM, 88.7 FM. And then TV channel 11 and channel 2. You know, I contacted our city council rep. She didn't know, so I told her. I contacted our CERT manager, a wonderful lady, and Marnie Rosen. And she says, yeah, those are the ones. Do I have anything wrong on that, sir?
No.
Okay.
But I can add one more.
Yes, sir.
Everyone will get the TransStar app. It will show flooding and it will show blocked roadway.
Wonderful.
There's also an HF channel.
App.
Yeah,
For your
also-
cell phone.
We'll get there.
Houston TransStar app. And
All right.
like I said, it will show flooding across the entire area. And it will show the blocked roadways also.
All right. Now, all of these, that's good to know. I appreciate it. All of these assume you've got power, you've got cell phones. Mike, you had something?
The Aries representative here at TransStar will be on 147.000. So whenever they have any information and transmit it, or they're requesting any information, it'll be on 147.000.
Stephen, next one, please.
What's that?
If they activate it.
Well, for a big storm, they do.
Monitor conditions.
They did for the one that just missed us a few months ago.
Yeah. Stream levels in your area. This is the Harris County flood warning system. It brings up a map of the whole area with a whole bunch of little boxes. Find a box that's close to you, zoom in on it, and then if you click on it, it will take you to a diagram of that bio or stream channel. It shows you the current elevation, the rainfall total of that site, what the flood level elevation is, so that tells you how much headroom that stream channel has. I've got 3 close to my house that I monitor when there's something going on. 2 are online, the other one, I ride my bicycle to the end of the street and look at the canal that rolls into Brays Bayou. Road conditions, Houston area, Transtar, absolutely the best. For the state of Texas, drivetexas.org. It shows the entire state, and you can click on which layers. I usually just turn on construction and flooding. Shows you where there's problems getting out of your area, getting into an area for help or whatever. Next one, sir. Extra things to keep that I keep in my home to be ready. Chlorine bleach or pool shock, calcium hypochlorite. Now that is the same stuff they use for drinking water supplies. I used to work in a water plant, and that's what we used. That or gaseous chlorine. Deep cycle batteries, solar panels, solar recharged flashlight, solar or crank charged broadcast radio. I've got one that has a solar panel on it. It's got a little hand crank on the side. I can actually use that to charge my cell phone if I have to. All available on, I'm not going to say any company names like Amazon.com, but you'll know where to find them. Had to have a disclaimer. Okay, next. How to purify drinking water. This is the web page that I went to double check it. I have checked it against the Scout Manual, the Houston Health Department, as well as this site for bleach. If you've got whatever water you've got, run it through a towel to get out the big chunks. And then fill a pitcher with water, 4 drops of bleach per quart of water. Let it sit for 30 minutes. That's enough chlorine. Now, doing some more research on chlorine bleach, it says bleach has an expiration date, 6 months to 1 year after you buy it. Now in Houston Heat, the official expiration date is going to be 6 months. But if you think your bleach is weak, you can double this, just fine, and let it sit, and you can smell it. If you smell chlorine, just let it sit a little bit longer and that will come out, but that means it's done its job. Next one, please. Now, pool shock. Since chlorine bleach has an expiration, on a chlorine, get the plain unscented. You go in a store, you walk down that aisle, a lot of them are going to be lavender scented.
But what if I want flavored water?
You do what you want, my friend.
Scotch is good for that.
The pool shock, what this fellow did is he made his own stock bleach, basically. 1 teaspoon of pool shock per gallon of water, and then 3/4 of an ounce of that solution to a gallon of water to disinfect it just like the other one. But pool shock, you can buy it, it's like $2 or $3 for a little 1 pound plastic tube, and you put that someplace where it's not going to get too hot, and it's going to have a shelf life of several years. And it's a lot easier to carry that around than several gallons of bleach. Okay, next one. Be radio ready. This is a ham radio club. We need to be radio ready. Secure or lower your antennas. Wire antennas, anything. If you're strung between trees and they get to whipping around in the wind, it's either going to tangle it up or break your wire. So lower it down. Spare wire for HF antennas, or have some that are ready made. You've already cut, you've tuned, you just need to get the string and put them up. Spare 2 meter J pole. You can put it on a 10-foot section of 2x2 or 1.5 inch PVC. And then use some string and some tent stakes as guy lines on it. And so I have the string available. Okay, next. charge the batteries for your HTs, and if you've got deep cycle batteries or car batteries for your base station, keep those charged up too. I've got solar panels and charge controllers that I use to keep a couple of batteries topped off, and I can run all day and half the night. So I can run all night on just monitoring. Know the nets you can reach. Your simplex, emergency, and traffic nets. This is 2 meter and HF, either one. And a lot of them, we've got a lot of very good repeater nets around town. We've got some very good simplex nets that have been created around town just in the past year or so. And in HF, the traffic nets, there's 2 or 3 of them that I'll just sit and monitor sometimes, right now. So next, some nets that I monitor, the net name, frequency, the tone, date and time, if it's specific. I don't have anything there because if you're talking about emergency, these are the ones you want to monitor, and they're going to be, if they're activated, they're going to be on all the time. If you have a problem, but you don't hear anything, call out. So TranStar, I've got 3 frequencies. Hopefully I've got these correct. 147,000, I think is primary. 145,370, 145,170 are backups. Now during Harvey, we had some towers or some equipment that was flooded out. And these guys did a great job. They would say, I'm going to, and I could chase them. There were like a half a dozen different repeaters during that storm that I had to monitor. But when we had a gas line break in my neighborhood, I was able to call out. It was underneath the sidewalk. It was a 4-inch line, subheader underneath the sidewalk. It was bubbling gas up through the standing water. Our block captain knew that I've got pipeline experience and that I'm a radio operator. She had me go meet security. I went over there. I figured out what was going on. I called TranStar. Gave my call, called out TranStar, KD5 HDF traffic. All the other chatter stopped. He responded, what's your traffic? I told him, hold on, third party traffic, next voice you hear is so-and-so. I gave him the name. And the guy said, what's you at? Give me exact location, which I could do. And I could hear the paper rustling. He said, I got a truck 10 minutes away. Okay, who am I talking to? I'm the president of TranStar. I'm going to make this happen. The president of Centerpoint. I'm going to make this happen. We had a truck there in 10 minutes and he found a valve and shut off that gas. It works. And ever since, and it was right after that my subdivision says, when I approached them about field day, yeah, you can come in and have field day here. Yeah. Aries, back up just one. Aries, I've got one down here, 146.76. That's another Aries frequency. I'm going to give you a link to a whole bunch of them in a moment. Go ahead. Central Texas Traffic Net, normally Monday through Saturday. Hurricane Watch Net, as needed, 2 frequencies. 14.325 and 72.68. 72.90 Traffic Net, guess what frequency it's on? And Monday through Thursday, 1600 to 1800 Central Time, daily. And I'll check into them a couple times a month just to make sure that I can get to them.
There was a question on the chat saying, are these charts going to be posted?
Yes, this whole thing will be posted. Maritime Net, 14,300, Monday through Friday, every day, all day. And he will call out for maritime emergency, maritime general, then anybody. And I'll check into them once or twice a month just to make sure that I can hit them. And they've got people all over the country. I listened one time, there was a ship sinking about 100 miles off the coast of Peru, and the way Skip was working, they couldn't get hold of the Peruvian Coast Guard. Maritime Net heard them, U.S. Coast Guard, then contacted Peruvian Coast Guard. They saved about a dozen people. So you hear something like that, you just sit quiet and listen. Unless they call out for they need a relay and you can hear both parties. Central States Traffic Net, 7253.5, 1230. Dang, it's supposed to be 1330. It's only an hour, not 7330. That's not a time of the day I want to be up. 1230 to 1330 Central Time. I think there's one more. Page down, please. Is that it? Should be one more slide. There it is. Find more, arrl.org/nets. They have a list. It has a search engine. What kind of net are you looking for? Regional, statewide, whatever, and it'll give you a list. And so the net search, the net directory, this one is more of a description of the nets. This is the actual search engine. And then Harris County Aries frequencies. This is Harris County Aries.org. They have a big long table of all the frequencies they use, and whether it's for a net or for emergency activation. So it's a great resource. And I pulled these up just a couple days ago to make sure the links worked, and I did a copy and paste on the link into this slide pack. So be ready. The biggest thing is have a plan. Make sure you're safe. After that, if you and your family are safe, after that you can consider any kind of public service. What I've done is I've let my neighborhood know that when the phones go out, because we know they will, when the power goes out, because you know it will, I'm going to have battery power and can contact one of the emergency groups as needed. Questions?
Any questions, comments?
Helpful?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
As a club thing, not only our club, but other clubs, I've always asked you guys this, and I really appreciate everybody kind of indulges me about this. Wellness check on club members. You know, we 1-7, listen on 1-7, check in, just tell everybody you're okay. You know, and if you're somebody you can reach out to, do that. You know, just kind of a club courtesy between us. We're all friends and want to know that we're safe. You know, we're doing okay.
And we've got some members with limited mobility, and checking on them is a good idea.
Just to let you know, if you don't check in and let us know you're okay, you're gonna be the next club president.
There's always a catch.
Also, if anybody's interested in the national traffic system and learning how to receive and send messages through the system, they have a practice net every Monday night on 146.94 at 6:30, and then there's it's the practice session. And then on Thursday on 147.000 at 6:30 is the National Traffic Net. So that's, they send messages at both of them, and both of them can be used for training. So if you're interested in learning how to send and receive messages over the system, you can just listen in first few times and then, maybe sign in and do whatever.
There's a 2-page training thing that says, here's what each of these boxes on the form means. It's a little half-page form, and it's got a particular format, and it's got some codes that go under. The codes, once you look at them and think about them, they really make sense. It's very simple. And so you use that form, and you can send a lot of information in short order. And just listen to some of the messages coming through while you look at that little training sheet, and it really comes to you pretty quick.
Where's that information
Where's one?
Where's the information at? I looked up, I went to ARRL National Traffic System, NTS, and I followed the links to get to a little form. It's a two-page training manual. They probably have it available through Aries also. That'd be a good thing to have a short presentation on at some point. I'll make a note of that.
Yeah, just a quick note, Ben said that, talking about the hurricane traffic, is that they're watching a storm coming in from southwestern Mexico into the Gulf now, so it's supposed to get in there by Wednesday of next week, so, be a good time to, kind of keep an eye on all of this stuff.
Thank you for that. All right. Now Mike, KI5MIK, has brought some cable samples to show. He picked them up at ABR just the other day, and we were talking about jumpers. He lives just a couple blocks from me. So he brought some samples for folks to look at, see how flexible they are. You've got a stiff version and a flex version of, what is it, ABR 500, or 400 rather?
There's 400 and 600, and the reason why I got these is I'm gonna put in a line, and I needed to know what was the best cable that would make the bend I need it to. So I went and got all of these from Chuck at
The
ABR.
400 and 600 are low loss cables.
Yeah, yeah. The 600 solid is the lowest loss cable that there is, and then there's the 600 Ultraflex, and then 400 is a little smaller. So it's
$1.50 a foot with.
Yeah, I put the prices
With
per
connectors.
foot on there as well.
Oh, okay.
But that's without connectors, so. But then again, there's probably discounts for length and everything like that.
There may
so.
be. I've ordered cables from ABR, custom cables, and I had them in 2 days. They shipped them to me 2 days by next day.
Yeah, or you can just drive up and pick them up. They're actually they're close to 290 in Bingle, which is not far from here. So going from here to get cables there is real easy. You can call up Shannon or Chuck and order one day, pick up maybe 2 days later or something like that.
So just so we can record it here, this, by the way, is going to be on the YouTube channel for the club. So which cable is, so the thickest one is the 600, is that how that works?
Right, the two closest to him are the 600, and the 400 is the smaller cables.
Huh.
The single strand is the solid, and the multi-strand is the Ultraflex.
Okay. And when you say 600 and 400, is that the same thing as LMR 400, LMR
Yeah.
600?
It's their version of it.
Yeah, ABR gets these cables made especially to their specifications, but they would be the equivalent to LMR.
Okay.
So for example, I'm putting a 65-foot run in, and I need the lowest loss possible. So the question was, there's one final bend that's gonna have to be made from a conduit down to my soffit, and if I can make it with the 600 solid, I'll buy that, and if I can't, I'll have to go back to the 600 flex. So that was the reason for getting that.
A emergency essentials list and hurricane preparedness, including the Houston area evacuation guide. So I've got these, whatever I don't hand out today, I'll put in my box of information to take out to field day. I've got some a good ARRL flyers for that. But hurricane preparation checklist here. So I'll have these up here, grab one.
Yeah, we want to thank Ben and Ben Gillis and Dexter Lewis, volunteers, thanks. They got your merit badge on there. So this is I call it the workshop, but it's just really sort of the soldering presentation. And then it's got a lot of stuff in it because I had it for several groups. So we'll take it away. So soldering workshop. So it's it's everything that you need to know about soldering without having to do it. And so we're going to go through the safety, things to solder, equipment, procedures, fluxes, all the rest of the stuff, desoldering, desoldering, all kinds of examples, pictures, and all of that stuff. So what is soldering? It's basic. Solder is a metal alloy used to join parts together. Got different kinds of parts depending on the connection. They're also electrically conductive, of course, and they have to be strong enough to hold the components in place. for shock, vibration, heat, age, and everything else. So applying solder is soldering, as it were. Just one thing about, anything that's dealing with hot irons, you can get burned. Anybody that's done a fair amount of soldering has had one or more of those injuries before. One of the worst ones though is solder spitting or solder splatter. You're in there, you don't have safety glasses, that stuff can burn up and catch you in the eye. So I actually have a pretty big solder burn on my leg right here that I got from desoldering something, and then the solder fell onto my leg. And of course I wasn't wearing pants, and it gave me a nice 3rd-degree burn, among other injuries that I have to my leg. So now I always wear chaps when I solder.
I use a lab apron.
Yes, yeah, leathers. So the other thing is lead is poisonous, as you probably know. For us old guys, it's not that big of a deal because we're already learning disabled, but the residues are poisonous to children, mainly for learning disabilities and stuff, stuff like lead paint, and that's mainly where the toxicity, lead paint and old-time leaded gasoline. So
Where do you get those respirators at?
That one? I don't know. Home Depot.
Okay.
These respirators, by the way, they are good for fumes. They're good for dust, mist, and fumes, and that's good enough for this kind of protection. Any other type of respirator is usually pretty good. The one thing that people don't realize though is that the absorptive effect of lead in the skin is very, very highly absorptive, and so he's not wearing gloves. I wear Kevlar gloves now when I do soldering, and then rubber gloves. Rubber gloves if I am not actually burning on anything. I do lead cleanup for my business, and so we have a lot of testing that goes on, and just a single swipe of lead onto the skin results in overexposure. The other thing is that there's some other components that you don't think are lead coated, but the old-time silvery connectors, certain types of galvanized metal with zinc in it also have very, very high lead contents, and it's not really obvious a lot of times what that is. So just make sure you wash your hands and after you solder. So the soldering, what is it? It's, like I mentioned, it's joining different kinds of materials. You have soft solder, hard solder, silver solder, brazing. Those are the main kinds of things that they call solder as opposed to welding. So soldering is the materials are applied to cause the joining, and welding, they're melted together to cause the joining. So those are the main solder components. So actually I want to skip that one. So here's your soldering equipment, your kind of regular stick solder there on the left, kind of your basic go-to unit, then the adjustable soldering irons and variable heat. Those are the ones I use. And then you have some very minor accessories. You have a sponge, which I'll go into here quickly, and then a brass roller pad. Keep the solder gun tip or whatever it is prepped for work. You have, of course, all kinds of accessories. Your little clippers, your hemostats, your nippers, your grabbers, your heat sinks. Pans to hold the solder so you don't splatter it all over yourself, and then various manipulators and things. I think you get the picture. So the soldering procedure is more than, for anything other than just a simple connection. You got to assemble all your toys, get everything ready, scrape, prepare the tip, add the flux, tin the iron, and start soldering. A lot of things that people don't recognize that don't solder all the time is the shocking of the tip with the moist pad and making sure that the tip is cleaned and deoxidized is a big portion of this. Shocking the tip actually recrystallizes the grains in the metal in the tip, and it keeps it from corroding. So that's an important part that a lot of people forget about. So so we're talking about the corrosion and just the preparation of the tip. So this one on the left is a composite tip that has a ceramic center and alloy, specialized alloy, so that it won't become oxidized. This is just a regular copper tip or a metal alloy tip. These are the kind that tend to corrode. But if you overheat it, or you don't clean it, or you abuse it, even the special tips will eventually corrode. So that's what the corrosion looks like. That's just from the lead getting in the grain boundaries of the metal. And once it gets to that point, you have to either grind it off or throw it away. Same thing here. A little too much oxidation on there. It hasn't been tinned or prepped. So once the tips get to that point, they've had it. So what do we solder? So in the olden days, which all of us have, probably except for Christy maybe, have experienced, the regular surface mount, tab mount, and essentially the manual components. That was all what was soldered. You make the lug here, connect the wire into the lug, tin that, and and solder it, and very easy for us old guys to manipulate back in that point. Nowadays, it's all kind of surface mount, or very small photo etch circuit boards. I think even we can handle these now for us guys, but that's basically what it is. So you have your component outline labels. Most of these are double-sided. The wiring and stuff on there can either be mechanically or chemically etched. We're looking at the component side here. This is not a double-sided board, but now with everything that's like this is almost always done by computer or robot. So, but there's plenty of other stuff to solder. Back in some point in my life, I also did solder art. That is not my art, but I used to take little electronic components and make little people with them and stuff. So those were kind of cool. And then bowls and stained glass and whatnot. So there's plenty of other stuff to solder. Fluxes. So there's always a flux to deal with in electronics. That is essentially a flowing agent or wetting agent to improve the solder, to improve the solder adhesion. And there's basically three types. You have the acid type, which is used for metalworking and plumbing and that sort of stuff. Rosin type is electronics, which is basically tree sap dissolved in alcohol or some other solvent, and that with the alcohol or the solvent in there removes the oxide coating from the circuit. Okay.
Watch your cable.
Yeah. Unlimited shelf life, very stable, well-known technology, so that's why it hasn't really changed very much. You have some other specialty stuff, water-soluble and green type fluxes that are a little bit more restricted in their use. I don't use water-soluble because it's just too much of a pain in the neck, and it has some drawbacks. So rosin type is what everybody's using. So the fluxes come in different forms and types and layouts and all of that, and I use this kind of the cup type here in my Go kit, and then I also use the liquid in my shack. And the reason I don't use the liquid in my Go kit is that when that crap spills into the Go kit, it's really a mess. So I keep everything in double containers, so that even if it does get loose, it's contained. So I keep these in a double plastic bag, and then I keep this in a pill bottle, and then put that in another jar so it won't spill out. But that's the worst of all the things that I've had that have happened, losing the flux into your go kit's the worst.
The pens are great. I would do that.
Pardon?
Back up one. That pen just to the left of the bottle. See that pen?
Bottom center.
Yeah. Oh, liquid solder compound, liquid solder flux. Yeah, it depends.
No, on the bottom, to the left of the bottle.
This?
No.
That one.
Right
Yeah.
there.
That's just liquid solder flux in a.
Well, it's in a pen, and that's, if you want something for portable use to put in a go box, I would recommend that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. I mean, and that just, for just very small, for a small, job, those are good. And I don't, actually surprisingly, don't have one of those. I just use the flux on the soldering iron. But yeah, you're right. And then of course there's flux already in the solder. So most of that solder already has some flux in it, right there. But for bigger jobs, you still put the rosin.
You apply the flux to the
Apply
iron.
the flux to the wire.
To the wire, which, so if you're gonna solder something, something you're going to solder gets flux.
Right, you brush that on there, and then as you heat the component up, that burns off and then takes care of the oxidation. Solders, of course, there's a ton of different kinds of solders. We're just used to 60/40s, but for various kinds of purposes, there's all kinds of different alloy compositions, melting range, tensile strength, and other mechanical properties, as you might expect. They're not flying spacecraft with 60/40 solders on them. So, and for each kind of process, there's all different sorts of solders and whatnot. So just to recognize that there's more than the 60/40 that we see.
Big deal these days in manufacturing is pretty much, required everywhere is this, what they call the row house solder with no lead. That's, it's like nobody these days builds with lead-based solder. The
Right.
hobbyist guys will use it, but in manufacturing, it's taboo. Nobody does it.
We're gonna take a look a little bit at that, Well, I don't use Rojas solder just because I've got a ton of 60/40 and it's just a pain in the neck. It doesn't really work as well.
Doesn't melt as well and flow like the leaded solder does, and it's a lot harder to work with.
Yeah, right, much harder to work with, and I'm not that concerned about my small exposure of lead, with the 60/40. One thing you hardly ever see is how they actually make the solder. And so what they do is they take the ingots and I'll show a little bit later how the raw lead is generated, but they have a billet that they stick into the machine. It necks it down. They have a flux bead that goes into it, and essentially they just sort of roll this stuff out and stretch it out, and then spool it up into the solder, into the draw block. And so I don't think there's any domestic production of this. It's all overseas. I think like Vietnam and stuff, they make a lot of this solder stuff, but there's a lot of it being made. Irons, obviously there's a range of different types of irons for different applications. This pretty much covers the whole gamut of types of soldering irons. I think I have one of these here that's got, temperature control, and I can adjust, fine adjustment. The Go Box, of course, has one of these. I've got one of those. I do like the guns too, because these have enough power so that if I'm trying to do a connector, I don't have to work that hard.
I don't see the flux capacitor.
Yeah, the flux capacitor, and then
That's the one that Mark started on.
Yeah, that's what I started on, back in the old days.
Question, so I've seen soldering irons that work off of 12 volts. So I'm tempted to buy one from Amazon and actually put Anderson power poles. Have you heard about 12 volt DC soldering irons? Are they worth
as long as you got the power supply to run them, because if you're gonna run more than if you run 50 watts, that's fine. But I haven't had the need for a 12-volt one, but I'm sure there.
Yeah, but it'll get you 30 watts. I mean, you should be able
Yeah.
to do some emergency repairs.
I think it was Ryobi just came out with one that uses a
Battery.
20-volt system. You
Yeah.
just plug it in there.
Yeah, that'd work. Yeah, I mean, have battery powered. But yeah, I mean, a 12-volt
I've
would
got one
work.
of those made by, Milwaukee. That works pretty good. It'll get about 30 minutes of good soldering time.
In an emergency, it can get you out of a bind. Yep.
What I use actually for mine, for my Go box, I use a butane. I have one that's like a gun, like it's a little bit bigger than this gas one that's shown here, and I use it for cooking actually, and for like creme brulee. But it's my my Go box soldering iron, and I use that when I tower climb. So if I have to make a quick connection up on a tower, I use the gas gun. So the other kinds of irons, heavy duties. I think some of you guys have seen my big Bertha that I use for connectors. It's one of those kinds of. It's about a 200-watt soldering iron, and then of course they use for flashing and conduit and other stuff. These are a little bit harder to get, but every once in a while the heavy duty ones do come in handy. The tips, as I mentioned, all kinds of tips for different sort of applications. Any of the things that work in the soldering stations all have the newer design tips, antioxidant, where you've got the hard alloy tips on them, or ceramics that won't break down, oxygen free, and won't degrade or recrystallize as they're used. So they've got a much longer lifespan and they're a lot better. The other metal alloy, different shapes and stuff for different sorts of components, that of course you expect that. Solders, they come in different diameters, different sizes, whatever. I typically use a 0.05 or an 032, something in the mid-range, something enough where I can get into small wires and connectors and stuff like that. Most of the stuff I'm doing is connectors or antennas. So, but all different diameters, different alloys, different this, different that. The last part of this is the surface mounts, which most of the electronics is now. None of that is done with a soldering iron really anymore. It's all done with a hot air gun like this, with solder is special solder with a low enough melting point. Solder, essentially it's flux and solder together, and then you just come through and just sort of heat this up and blow dry literally blow dry the solder onto the component. With this, essentially, the solder is a paste that's set on the tabs, and then you can run through it with one of these very, very fine soldering irons, but it just takes a second to get it to melt, and then you got to go back and sort of clean it up and dress it up so that you don't have shorts and whatnot in here. That's where these solder guns or these air guns come in real handy, because you can very, very carefully control how the solder wets the circuit. The other thing about the blow guns or the heat guns is that a lot of times the chips themselves will actually have a conductive pad below the bottom of the chip, and you actually have to heat the entire chip up in order to get it to actually adhere to the circuit board. So that's something that a lot of guys don't know when they're doing these kinds of work. I've done this once, replaced a chip like this once in a TV, and it happened to work remarkably, but I needed a microscope and had to do a bunch of practice and stuff, and it's like you really got to want to do it, or in order to either have experience or really want to do it, because it's a pain in the neck. As Barry was mentioning, you know, the solders now that they use are these lead-free solders, raw solders. All the computer boards and everything else, nothing is done manually. They take the solder, they melt it, put it in a big bath, roll the circuit board across the take the circuit board, roll it across the solder, it wets everything, and that's why all the circuit boards look perfect, because nobody's doing it by hand. So, but for us, you know, a lot of it's just gonna be making the solder joint, making sure that the parts are clean, the tips are prepared, you heat up the junction, get it to the right temperature, apply the solder, let it cool, and there you go. So, and then here's the process. So you get the component, stick it in the board, apply the solder, get the, get it so that it's looking nice and clean, clip off the component. That's about most of the work that we're ever gonna do on a
And a good solder joint should be shiny, not cloudy.
Right, yeah. So I'm not gonna go through every one of these things here. So talking about the what's good, the good, the bad, that's coming up. So these show the, I think we only have 2 joints in here where it looks good. I don't think, after looking at this, I don't think it's a big stretch to see what's a good solder joint and what's not. If it's nice and smooth and it looks solid, it's probably good. Any gaps, blobs, blurps, whatever, it's not a good solder joint. Okay? So it's gotta look pretty. So, a bunch of defects type here. Something called a cold solder joint is where there's not enough temperature applied to fully melt the solder. So there's still some solid, the solder is a mixture of 2 different components that melt at different temperatures. And if the alloy is not completely heated to the eutectic point, or to the lowest melting point, it will cause a cold solder joint. And then of course this one here is, so cold joints are the most common, and then this one is just overheated, where it just burns the board and it doesn't allow the solder to adhere to the pad. Others are another problem, which is insufficient wetting. So the tab is oxidized, or has oil or some other crap on it that prevents the solder from wetting the tab. Here it's just not, maybe there's not enough heat, the soldering iron wasn't applied evenly to the pad and to the tab, something like that.
Is that a flux fix problem? Could you use flux?
You can fix these. Yeah, you can, anything where the tab is not burned, you can usually fix it.
You could go back to that one, and I've just made an observation.
Oh.
You're right there. So you see the guy in the center with a red circle? You notice how it's got a cross going to the copper, left and right, in, forward? That is like, it's tied to a lot of ground, that particular pin. And so that pin didn't get hot enough because the copper on the board acted as a heat sink and pulled all the heat away from the iron. And that's why that solder joint didn't get hot enough to where the solder flowed.
Other kinds of defects, obviously, again, we covered some of these before. One of the problems, a very common problem on circuit board repairs, or if you're messing around with your radio, like you're opening up the radio so that you can get the C8, the Mars cap mod, or you're messing around with stuff like this, repeated it up, separated from the board, and now you've damaged the circuit board. Those are hard to fix. They can be done, but you get to that point, it's almost time for the professionals to let at it. Splatter, that's another problem here, is you get little blobs of solder that just splatter off of the, whatever it is you're soldering, and you gotta clean that off and keep those from getting into the radio. Desoldering. Before you do solder, sometimes you gotta desolder. So you have a lot of different things to do desoldering with. Solder wick is kind of an underutilized material now. When you basically all you do is you kind of heat the wire up, essentially just wire mesh, heat it up, put it on the tab, and then that will wick up the solder and pull it away from the component. And solder wick actually works pretty good. It takes a little practice to get it so that it works right, but I was for many years I didn't really care for solder wick, and then starting to work with it a little bit more carefully, I found solder wick works really good. And you
It is impregnated with rosin.
Right, yeah, you have to rosin it, you have to have the right temperature get it hot enough, that kind of thing. So, but once you get used to it and you're doing a lot of stuff, it's very convenient. Desoldering for the very, very small components or multi-components, a desoldering pump is actually pretty good. These little these things just basically, are one shot. They're like a little gun. You kind of trigger it, and it sucks the solder up through the orifice there. Same thing here. For any sort of, this is another one that's kind of weird. It doesn't really work that well, but it will work. But as you get more sophisticated here, you get this down, you get these pumps working. They are very effective, especially for close, multi-pin, closely wired components where it's just impossible to use solder wick or a hand pump. Yeah, so professional grade desoldering. This thing has a vacuum in it. The solder is absorbed into some steel wool or something that's in the cartridge, and it will solder and vacuum out, or desolder and vacuum out at the same time. That's how I got burned on my leg. Popped open this thing, big blob of solder came down, burned me out. It was like, I knew I was messed up. I'm sorry for the quality of this, but this is and while we're talking about wiring, PL259 connectors and cables is probably the biggest thing that you're really going to solder. You strip off the braid, you solder a little bit on the braid just below where you're going to have the connector, kind of trim everything off, stick the connector in, solder the shield, and then solder the center conductor. There's a bunch of good videos, YouTube videos on there. Sorry about the quality, but that's where you really learn how to solder. What you do though is when you do practice, you don't practice you practice before you actually do it if you're not used to it.
Be sure you wear pants.
Yeah, be sure you wear pants and sunglasses and glasses, and then practice with a throwaway connector for a few different times before you actually do something that's system critical. Because if you've never done it, it's tricky. More kind of what's a good joint and what's a bad. But everything's smooth, it's silvery, it looks good. That's another one that looks good. Insufficient solder, real grumpy. That one, of course, is terrible. More good, bad, here, those ones on the right for solder lug look good, nice and smooth. The two on the bottom left are so that's what you want it to look like. If they look crappy, they probably are. So when I had done this, I came across a soldering contest. So there's handheld soldering competition going on across the world. This guy, of course, is going to get blasted in the eye with some solder splatter, but it's a different part of the world. The chemistry of solder though is actually pretty important, and, cause why did they just pick lead and tin, for this? So this is all the rest of the periodic table, lead and tin here in the group 14, similar chemical, characteristics as you guys know from your high school chemistry. Where lead though doesn't occur, it only there's different types of, different isotopes of lead that have different number of neutrons in them. You have 3 different kinds of lead, 4 different kinds of lead, and most of the lead comes from decay of radioactive materials. So when the Earth formed, there was only one kind of lead 204, okay? And then from decays from uranium and thorium produced all the rest of the lead, so that most of the lead that is around now is from decay of uranium, uranium-238, uranium-235, and then from thorium-232. So that's the bulk of the lead there. So the takeaway from that, which is kind of an interesting concept, is lead is one of the few elements that there's more today than there was yesterday. So there's always going to be more. Lead's never going to go away. We've got plenty of lead coming around, and it's just a matter of getting it from the small amounts that decay out into ore deposits that are around today. So the alloys, talking about the lead alloy 60-40, it represents the composition of tin and lead, or the percentage of tin and lead in the solder, and the particular alloy percentage really has to do with what the melting point of the lead and the tin are when they are combined together, and the electron bonding and the structure of these alloys just happens to be at 60-40, where is the lowest melting point of the lowest melting point of the combined alloys, and that is called the eutectic point. So the lowest point at which two metals will, when they're combined together, will melt, or any two substances. So if you look at the tin percentage here, you're going to see this is the percentage of metal here, this is the temperature here, and then these are the components of the lead in what they call a phase diagram. So but basically what to say is that lead melts at, pure lead melts at 327 degrees, pure tin melts at 232 degrees, and as the percentage of lead increases, the melting point decreases till this point here, which is 60-40. If you change that alloy percentage, the melting point begins to increase here. So this is the lowest point at 60% tin that a combination of lead and tin together will melt. That's called the eutectic. That's why solder is at 60-40.
That's a great graph.
Okay, clear? Everybody clear? Okay, good. So you guys just forgot about this in school.
Great graph.
So the other analogy here is antifreeze. Everybody knows about antifreeze in their cars. You have a certain amount of percentage of antifreeze that mix in there. It's the same thing. You're trying to get that melting point down very, very low, or the freezing point, so that as you add antifreeze, the colder it is, it's going to be able to withstand that cold all the way down to this point. So I don't recall what the percentages is, but if you have water here, water freezes at 0 degrees, you add ethylene glycol, blah, 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 goes down to that point here, so say 70%, it says 20, 40, 60, 80. So this is 60, 63%. And then, but if you add more ethylene glycol to the point where it's 100%, it's still gonna be below water temperature freezing, but it's gonna be about minus 15 degrees centigrade. So it's the same, just to give you a little bit of kind of comparison with something of everyday use. I'm not gonna go into the metal, there's all kinds of metallurgy and microtexture and all of this stuff, but these are when you look at solder close up under the microscope, these are what the grains look like in there, where you see the different phases of the phase diagram and what their textures look like as the material solidifies. So not relevant really for us here. Barry mentioned the Rojas solder, one of the low lead solder. One of the problems with Rojas solder and with other kinds of alloys that are designed to reduce toxicity is that they have some interesting crystal growth effects that cause these crystals to grow out of the solder itself, and these are actually little crystals. You know, I know we talk about it being lead, but lead is really kind of a crystal or a mineral or mineral phase. So these little whiskers tend to grow out, and they grow out really quickly. And as the temperature changes and as stresses change in this, the grain boundaries tend to recrystallize and stuff. And these things can grow very quickly, you know, within the lifetime of the circuit. Once these things touch that center conductor there, you have a short circuit, and that's it, you know. So I don't see what the size is. So this is 16 millimeter. I don't know what the size of this is, but these are pretty small. You know, these are in the hair, you know, the size of a hair, human hair, 70 microns, 60 microns, something like that. They're small, but not microscopic, you know, enough to be able to short the circuit.
43 magnification, it says.
Yeah,
16 millimeter.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. That's a scanning electron microscope photograph there. So, getting back a little bit more into the fundamentals, solder, known from antiquity, lead fastened to solder, fastened together, stuff like that. Lead, produced obviously for many, many years once its discovery. And then one of the things that actually was critical in the understanding of lead as a material to use was in people trying to convert lead into gold in the alchemy days. Okay, and that's where this is. So cupellation is the term that's used for the process to extract gold from the base metal, from the ore. The lead obviously doesn't arrive in the soldering spool, but it comes from various mines and deposits. For the geologists, of course, you know about different kinds of deposits. There's the different ore occurrences. These are where they are roughly. No ore deposits of lead in Texas or anywhere else there. There is a lot of other types of producing byproducts and stuff from different sorts of ores, but we're not going to go into that. But this crystal here, you probably guys have seen lead crystals, so a big square block of lead sulfide, and everybody should have some in their mineral collection. The other ores, these are, of course, just you see the cubic structure there, pretty distinctive, nice specimen. There's no domestic lead smelters in the U.S. anymore. There's a lot of battery recycling, but these big smelter complexes and stuff that took ores from all the production and byproducts there in the Western United States, Canada, you know, have generated a huge amount of waste product. El Paso, Texas was one of the largest lead zinc smelters in the world at one time, now shut down. And then you have other sort of stuff in the central part of the U.S., like in the Pitcher, Oklahoma area, where you've just got millions of tons of stuff left over from processing of lead ores that are there. In fact, the entire town has been bought up and evacuated because the lead content is so great. And then, of course, this kind of stuff keeps me employed for a very long period of time cleaning up these messes. So I did work at the OFARC smelter, cleaning that up. I work in Kansas cleaning up residues from smelters related to the Oklahoma, Kansas mines.
Does that silica still have lead in it?
It still has lead in it. These are called the chat waste, but it's very tightly bound, and so it does actually have a reuse, and use it as road base.
You said it does or does not have reuse?
It does have reuse.
Okay.
Yeah, it does have lead in it, but the bioavailability of the lead is not very good. But stuff like lead paint and lead gasoline and all that stuff, very highly bioavailable, very highly toxic. Tin, again, same thing, known from antiquity. Lead and tin tend to form together, as I mentioned, because they're both in column 14 of the periodic table. And tin was, of course, used for making bronze, so there was a lot of interest in, once tin and copper alloys were discovered, the recovery of tin for making bronze became a big deal. And I won't go through all the rest of the stuff there, but also, since tin is the largest component of solder, and that's also a big component of this the Rojas solders, there's a big demand for tin all over the world now. And then, but these are how actually tin is mined. So you have these granites, or these big granite bodies that are enriched in tin. They're weathered out and they're exposed at the surface. And and because this stuff is all sort of gravelly, it's very loose. You just come in with this dredge, and then you basically sluice the tin metal, or it's not metal, but the tin mineral, which I don't think I have a picture of here. You sluice it over, jig it on these jigs. You create this concentrate. This is further roasted to drive off the unwanted components, and then you melt it, and then it's turned into ingots. So it's a pretty messy process. Those are the tin. Both of these are from Malaysia, actually. There is tin production in England, or was, and then also in South America. So in Texas, though, they had during the war, they had the largest tin smelter in the country, or the only tin smelter in the country, down in Texas City. And so they called it the Longhorn Tin Smelter. They are now called the Tex Tin site. But this was during the war, Malaysia was obviously taken by the Japanese, and so all of the production that came into the US came from Bolivia. So the Bolivian ores were very messy, and they contained arsenic and mercury and uranium and all kinds of stuff in there. But the plant was built specifically to take these low-grade ores and turn them into tin, for the US use. So, and of course the port was here, and the fuel was here, and all of that stuff. So Royal Dutch Shell, or Billiton, was the only tin producer, the only tin operator in the world at the time, and they developed the tin recovery process. In 1940, the US government, seeing that the war was coming, had Billiton, Royal Dutch come in, build the plant, and then it was operated under the War Production Act until 48, and then the plant was sold, and then operated as a secondary tin, copper, and metal recovery plant up until the 80s, when the furnace broke and it was shut down and abandoned. And then after that, it became a federal Superfund site, and it has kept me employed since 2000. So I'm one of the project managers on the site. So now everything is demolished now. Marathon Oil runs a laydown yard over here, another facility. We've got a gas gathering facility over there now. And although we have radioactive groundwater in the site that we're cleaning up, so that again, it's been a nice little legacy over that period of time for me. And talking about the legacies, there's part of the legacy there. Huge amounts of electronic scrap that are not really well recovered. You know, I'm sure you guys have thrown away or discharged, you know, have unused electronic equipment, computers, cell phones and whatnot, TVs. So a lot of this stuff ends up, if it's even recovered, ends up in India or, you know, somewhere in the Far East for recycling. And just in terms of and a lot of the components of this, in addition to lead, you know, they're lead, which is a large component. You know, you got silver, you got gold, you've got niobium, tantalum, all the other scandium, all the other elements that go into making the electronics, which is the topic of another presentation that I have going down the road. So,
Note on that, City of Houston has a hazardous waste recycling location at South Post Oak at South Main. It's a drive-in, you tell them what you got, and they'll direct you to the correct area, and they'll unload it. When I was unloading my dad's workroom, I found about a half pint of liquid mercury. I did take it down to that site, take care of it properly.
Take a water bill to prove your
Yeah. They want to see a City of Houston address on a utility bill with your name and address.
and I'll take all the gold waste that you got. So there you go. All right, that's it.
Cool.
Questions? Okay.
So you put a selfie on there.